Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Drums webinar this afternoon, a festive campaign with all the trimmings, a how-to guide on creative collaboration. My name is Naomi Taylor and I'll be your host this afternoon, and we're very lucky to be joined by some special guests today, Hazel Austin, who is Brand Marketing Manager at Age UK, and Mike Kingston, who's Account Exec at Binder. So, as we all know, the festive season for marketing starts long before your usual Christmas shopping, which for me is obviously Christmas Eve, as we have just been chatting earlier, guys. No, the seasonal campaign starts months and months in advance. Working with multiple creatives and agencies can make it really tough to push through campaigns with speed and efficiency, especially when you've got all these lengthy approval processes. So it makes it really difficult to deliver consistent and timely results when there's so many people involved. Luckily this afternoon, to ease our qualms for seasonal planning next year, we've got Age UK and digital asset management platform Binder here to tell us how we can make life a lot easier and add the pigs and blankets to your festive campaigns of the future. Apologies. A few pieces of housekeeping. On the webinar panel at the side of your screen, you can ask any questions you might have, and we can have a short Q&A at the end of the session. So please don't be shy and fire through your questions, and I can ask them at the end. And without further ado, and no more Christmas puns, hopefully, I'll pass over to Hazel, who'll be taking us through how Age UK were able to manage multiple creatives and create their prolific 2016 campaign. So welcome, Hazel.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Hazel Austin and I'm the Brand Marketing Manager at Age UK, and I'll be taking you through my presentation today. But before I do, I'd also like to hand over to Mike so he can introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Mike Kingston and I'm an account executive at Binder here in the UK. And I suppose my role really is to help sort of companies understand sort of their current tools, their current approach, their current methods, and how I suppose solutions like Binder and other sort of digital asset management platforms out there can really sort of have quite a big impact on their sort of on their ways of working.
Great. So I will begin really by just giving you an overview of Age UK as an organisation and what it is that we do. Age UK is in the business of talking about ageing, both the great and the challenging elements. And as the brand marketing manager there, I work to ensure that the Age UK brand is effectively and compliantly used and seen across all of our charities, all of our channels across the charity, including our projects, our campaigns, public relations, and our various partnerships as well. Age UK is the country's largest charity dedicated to helping everyone make the most of later life. And the work that we do mainly consists of providing information and advice. We also have a 24-hour advice line. We have a service and development team that work to develop programs and activities and services that we can look to upscale across the country. We also do a lot of campaigning, public relations for the rights of older people, and just trying to keep the issues high up on the agenda of whomever is in government at the time. We do a great deal of fundraising activity, and we also do a lot of policy and invest in research. So as well as being a national charity, we also have a really wide network of local Age UKs. We have approximately 155 spread across the country, and in that relationship we have developed our shared brand. So from a national perspective, we look and talk a certain way, but we also have this approach for our local partners as well. The 155 of local Age UKs across the country are all independent. They share our brand with the tone, the photography, and actually having this shared approach is very beneficial for everybody. In practice, we have a shared name, our logo, and from a national perspective, we provide infrastructure and support, some economies of scale where we can, and we do try to coordinate some national fundraising. One of the key things that we do is also offer a platform off the back of our national campaign, which hopefully you would have seen out and about in the most recent weeks. One of the challenges that we have had when we first launched, coming from a situation from two charity organisations that had quite different focuses, When we merged back in 2009, we came from Age Concern and Help the Aged. Quite different organisations. We had to find a way to bring us together, to have a consistent approach to the way that we spoke to people, to explain what it was that we did and identify actually what was our root cause and what we were trying to make a difference with. At the time where we launched, there were over 400 local age concerns, all very independent again. They all had their own identities, websites, brands and purpose. So when we did form in 2009, became Age UK, our big priority was actually how can we develop a brand that works for all of us? A brand that we really wanted to give local sentiment, that held national gravitas, that could be dignified and truthful when talking about difficult situations, but was also bold and engaging with audiences when talking about the work and how we would actually gain support from different people as well. So roll on a handful of years, we are now at 2014 and we wanted to review the brand that we had implemented back in 2009, try and just be a bit more focused. The organisation's aims and objectives had scaled quite a bit. We had bigger aims nationally across the country. We had lots of changes. When you think about cuts to government funding, we had lots of challenges where local charities just didn't have lots of money on the ground and how they're going to support people. So we needed to think about how our brand could actually remain powerful, remain strong and enable them to really make a difference. We wanted to develop our brand so we could scale things up and make real impact. We wanted to reach much more people. We wanted a brand that showed empathy and really focused on our messaging and our tone. One of the activities we did when we actually implemented our refresh was try to focus what it was that people would know about us. And so we developed 3 core perceptions for that organisation. So essentially what we wanted to do was challenge individual perceptions of ageing, to really promote the benefits. I think you had a lot of situations where people didn't know a lot of older people, didn't understand ageing, didn't really get why loneliness was such a big thing and what a difference it could make. We wanted to help more people by achieving some scale and impact of designing and developing services and products. And we wanted a brand that showed real empathy with our fundraising, with the way that we spoke to people, with the way we spoke about really difficult issues. So the refresh of our brand really focused on our messaging, the images that we use to portray older people and people in later life, the tone and the language that we would use. And also really reviewing the appropriate channels that we would use as well when communicating, actively showing that older people were doing amazing things, not just struggling and facing challenges, but actually there were some real great inspirational stories that are out there to share as well. So with that, we took a review of the images that we used, the language that we spoke, the way in which we referred to later life. You can see here some of the images and how we implemented them across various channels, our social media, our websites, some of our campaign materials. So as I mentioned, we went through this process of identifying what the challenges were. I think one of the key things that we'd identified was that we needed a way in which we could implement this brand across this network in an easy way, but actually that wasn't really resource intensive because we were actually a really small team. So the ability to police this was really, really challenging. Now, between 2009 and 2011, back when we first launched, we actually had a design studio. So that consisted of around 12 designers, copywriters, print production, art workers, and one single brand policeman. It was quite a costly way to do it, but at the time, actually, it was the best way because realistically, we didn't know what we didn't know. We had to work with the network to try and identify what this shared brand would be, and actually that took a lot of resource to kind of get to a final point. But it was very expensive, it was very convoluted, and it could be very slow. It also meant that we had quite limited flexibility whilst we were trying to identify what that brand would look like and what it would actually be. Our brand was okay. It was good. I think it looked and it said and it did what we needed it to do at the time. But because of the complexity of getting things done and the scale of the people we were trying to support, it was actually quite difficult for the network to get the best use of it. They didn't feel, I don't think, that they had the most flexible, the most power to use it as they would have liked to at a local level. And in truth, I think from the team's perspective, we were struggling to kind of keep up with the scale of the design requirements. So you may have gone from a situation where actually people only needed a poster and a leaflet that when they were developing opportunities on the ground, the scale of the things that we were doing were growing, which meant the scale of their need would grow as well. And our team hadn't really changed much to support that, so it was actually very difficult to manage. Again, as I say, we struggled because we didn't really know the exact thing that was required and what was going to be needed. So finding that halfway point between flexibility and compliance was really, really difficult. So one of the key things, as I mentioned, was when we were looking at this need, the network was growing. And when I say they were growing, it wasn't that there were more local age UKs, just the scale of what they were doing, who they were trying to support, the need locally on the ground, the older people that were struggling in their regions and their localities. So we needed to be more agile, essentially, to help them fulfill that need, communicate with people, and help local people understand who they were and how they could help. From a practical design situation, we needed a solution that was really going to be cost effective and scalable. From a technological perspective, we also needed a system that was easy for the local age UKs to use, was really easily accessible, something that was pretty easy for them to be trained in and easy for us to support them in. So from that perspective, our broad network had different capacities of technology, different skills, different resources in-house who would be responsible for this kind of work. So actually we had to make sure that whatever we were going to deliver to help them was going to be really, really easy to integrate and implement and get out there. So 2011, we introduced our first experience with a digital asset management system. And actually for us, it was revolutionary. It was something that, from a charity perspective, I don't think there was a great deal of out there, but it was tantamount. I think it really made a difference to our network because it was very easy to use. It was very accessible. The breadth of what we provided worked well on this system, and actually everybody, after we had implemented a really intense program of training and engagement, really got on board and saw the benefits of having something like this. When we implemented it, we knew that we needed a central place that all of our local age UKs could access their branded material. With limited resource, we needed to be able to serve the network, but still protect the brand presence without needing to physically police it. And the main thing, I think, for us was to allow the independent charities to evolve and fulfill their local requirements when engaging with people, whether through marketing or fundraising activity. So we had a range of assets on this system: service posters, leaflets, stationery, imagery, which was really, really important. And we supported the implementation of this original system with roadshows, training, a sign-up program, online resources, quick start videos, all those kinds of things that you would think of. The original rollout for this legacy system was over about 18 months. It was extremely resource intensive, and we did face a lot of teething problems, especially trying to support the varying technologies across the board and skill sets. But actually, once we overcame those difficulties, I think the network and us actually internally really start to see the benefit of having something of this nature. So fast forward to another 3 to 4 years, we discovered, obviously, with the things that are on the ground, as it was before, things had been advancing, the network had to be creative with how they were engaging. Income generation is a really key part of the work that local age UKs were doing, so we needed to be able to give them the resources at speed that engaged well with their various audiences, that looked professional. And we had gotten to this point where actually we identified that the system that we had wasn't really meeting that need for us anymore. The Age UK brand itself was actually growing in recognition. I think we had established a brand, a look, a feel where people would recognise us. They understood a bit more about what it was that the national charity was doing. We had, at that point, launched our winter campaign, No One Should Have No One, at the time, and was attracting really great support and interest from the likes of John Lewis. I think during this period as well, it's worth noting that the charity sector was also facing some difficulties. So it wasn't just an organisational challenge, but the charity sector was plagued with some challenging media attention, the trust amongst the people, those that we depend on to give was really waning, so we really needed to focus on how we could rebuild and solidify our place and our purpose. As I mentioned, the system that we had, whilst great when we first launched it, was really not really able to meet that need anymore, so we really needed a new solution. What we had identified was that based on the feedback we got from the network, based on the work we were doing nationally, it's actually we needed something that was really dynamic, really agile. It would allow the network to be flexible and work with the systems that they had. When we couldn't find what we needed in our existing system, what we did find was the network would actually start going locally. So they would produce assets and materials that we didn't see. So I think on the ground, what we found was our brand was probably getting a bit diluted because it wasn't being as compliant to our guidelines as we would have liked. But at the end of the day, I think it's understandable if you know that there are things happening locally and you need to take action and be flexible and be quick, and the resource that you need is not really able to do that for you, then these are the things that happen. I think the other key thing that we wanted to do was find a solution that allowed us to be confident that the network knew and loved our brand and that they would be happy to actually follow the brand guidelines, remain compliant, and something that we didn't necessarily have to police. So we began our journey. I think what we were quite aware of was that there was no way that we could be the only charitable organisation or organisation full stop that was facing this challenge. Many organisations that we had come across had a small brand team that were essentially supporting a really large scale group and a really dynamic requirements that were needed for them. Fast moving environment. We knew we couldn't have been the only ones out there, so we needed to have something that would actually protect our brand whilst being able to be scalable without the capability to really police it and have to police it actually. In addition, we need something that was cost effective. We are a charity at the end of the day. We are dependent on the donations and fundraising activity, and whatever we are going to do as an organisation, we do have to make sure that it's effective, but it's also respectful of the fact that we are using funds that are given to us, funds that are meant to help us develop services and support, and that's the main thing. So whatever we are going to implement, it has to add to that. It has to enable us to do that more effectively, making sure that we are compliant and making sure that we are making the best use of the funds that we get as well. At the end of the day, as an organisation such as ourselves, the main thing for us is making sure that we help and support older people. And as an infrastructure organisation helping the network, the key thing is making sure they have the tools and resources to do that. So in the first instance, when we started to look at what the options were, what it was that we needed, how it could work, potentially what it would cost, how we could implement this, we started with a number of, speaking to a lot of our partners. I think we began with about 10 of the local age UKs, a group of colleagues within the organisation as well, representative groups that we thought engaged with the network, could benefit from using a digital asset management system internally as well. It actually wasn't that difficult to convince the majority that a new system was needed. I think a lot of people were very frustrated with what we had and very keen to see what other things were out there and what better ways that we could work. What we did find was, because we hadn't had a system of this nature probably for about 5 years, we had no knowledge of what to expect cost-wise, what the kind of standard industry standard was, what things we would need, what would make it scalable. So we had to really do our research and really work hard to help our internal stakeholders understand the benefits, show them that we'd done our due diligence and really looking for a great supplier and identifying what was out there and what would work best for Age UK. So we really did have to be very strategic in our approach to win over the right people, definitely selling the long-term benefits. It's definitely not something that you implement and then review and then change. This is a long-term opportunity for us to look at something that's going to not just help the network, but actually help the wider organisation as well. And there are many, many benefits. Better supporting the network. We wanted something that was going to give us the confidence that our brand was going to be compliant on the ground across the country, and that actually the network was happy to use it and happy to be compliant. I think that was one of my key things. Something that was easy to scale and if we could future-proof to a degree as well. So we knew what we needed at the time, but there was also an element of technologies developing and requirements changing in the future, and hoping to have a system that would enable that as well. From a technical perspective, making sure that whatever we implemented really integrated with the systems that we had and actually didn't become a burden to have one more system that everyone had to learn. And as I mentioned, really the ability to be agile and have a support network there that would enable us to discuss future requirements and actually help us to deliver them. So key things we started by asking were, what were other people doing? What other suppliers existed? And I suppose more interestingly, what was the going rate for a digital asset management these days? We worked with an in-house project manager to really build up and identify what it was that we thought we needed. So we looked at our must-haves, our should-haves, our could-haves, and things that actually probably very nice to have, but weren't a necessity at the time. We did a really deep dive into the range of suppliers that were out there. We spoke with other charity contacts, which was really, really useful actually. Reviewed longer term needs as well, like I mentioned. It wasn't just about introducing something for the now, it was great to get something for now, but actually what are we thinking about in the next 5 or so years, and how is this system going to help us to get to that point as well? So to get things going from the network's perspective, we cherry-picked these colleagues cross-divisionally. We spoke to them about how we thought this system could help them. We also challenged them to tell us how they thought a system like this, would make a difference to the work that they're doing. We used our existing knowledge of what the local AGKs were already doing, the challenges that they told us that they'd been facing for some time, and also the limitations from our team and what we could do and what we could deliver to kind of help form the basis of what we were going to do. And from there, we actually built a business case to encourage and inform and advise our board and essentially get them to sign it off. We didn't actually know what to expect from these systems. As I say, we launched as AGK in 2009. 5-6 years down the road, it's very, very different. The advent of social media, for example, when we first had our original system, we had no need to accommodate social media resources and assets. Every campaign we do now, it is a necessity that we have these assets as part of the resources that we supply. So it's how do we make it usable? Video was another thing that we never used to really consider. It's very much part and parcel of a lot of the work that we do now, animation, graphics, GIFs. We needed to have a system that could accommodate the development of those kinds of things, that could house those kinds of things, and could make these things shareable as well. So we also couldn't just consider what we needed internally. So we had a lot of knowledge on what we thought were the issues and we thought were the challenges, but we really did have to go wide to find out what everybody else thought, how they thought it could benefit their work in their teams, and also the differences it could make for the wider organisation. So we conducted quite an extensive period of discovery, actually, looking at the network, the internal users. We had a number of internal brand discussions where we reached out to these other organisations, other charities, to find out actually what it was that they did, and what the new solution, or what a new solution could do for them and did do for them, and how it would make our lives and their lives easier. Key things that we found from the network's perspective, we needed an image library, and I think this is a need for all charities. We depend heavily on the images. AGK aims to use the images of people we support. We try to not use too much in the way of stock images. When we're talking to people and talking about the work that we do and the stories that we're telling, it really helps to drive the message home when you are seeing the face of someone that has been effective. And so we do try to use real images of real people when we're talking about the work we do. One of the challenges that we faced from the network was the lack of diversity in the images that we had. So we needed a system that gave us scale, that allowed us to not just put images on the system, but also allow the network to share their images as well. They're based across the country, so they would be able to supply us with the most diverse breadth of imagery. Something that allowed quick and easy sharing, something that was really easy to use and was really user-friendly. It was easily integrated into the systems that they had. It was really important that we had something that could grow with our needs, as I mentioned, and that it could have access that could be separated. So we do work that's national, but we also have a great provision for the local network. So how do we have a system that allows us to separate that so the appropriate parties access just what they need? And this was really helpful because actually it started to paint a broader picture of the need and the possibilities of a system like this. So using the data that we collected, we actually had to go to tender. We had a really comprehensive brief of what we required, which I think was really helpful in us really being able to separate essentially the wheat from the chaff, which was great. It made it, I'd like to say, far faster process, but it didn't. It's a very slow process, but it was really helpful to be very prescriptive. If I can recommend nothing else, if you ever go out to tender or something like this, be specific in your requirements, because it does make a difference in essentially what you get back and how people will try to support you. So following that process, we then actually had a really big victory in identifying our suppliers, Binder. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And essentially Brand Hub was born. As I say, we went through a really comprehensive tendering process, but from that, it was a really, I'd like to say, an easy build because we were very clear on what we needed. The key thing after that was getting it set up, finding out if it would meet the need that we had thought it would. We began our building, and then essentially we had a really comprehensive feedback process. We had a soft launch, I believe it was, July 2016. We actually did that soft launch with about 10 local AGKs that were really willing to be involved. They had previously been quite heavy users of our legacy system, and over the years had given us really strong feedback on their requirements and what they would hope a system like this would do. So we were able to build a system, get them to test. We created a number of templates for the system, which was one of the key things for us when we were looking for our digital asset management system. A lot of how we thought we would best support the network was giving them branded templates that they could localize on the ground. They could personalize it accordingly. They could use imagery that reflected their network and their community, and really engage with the local people. So we worked with them to create a number of templates. The processes for them to trial those, we did that over a weekly basis over a course of about 2 to 3 months. So each week we would give them a list of tasks. We would ask them to trial the templates, give us feedback on their user experience, tell us where there were issues, let us know if there were anything that we perhaps forgotten or missed. And even if they had like new ideas about things we could do, because we were doing everything based on essentially what we had done before. So it was a really great time to get their feedback on actually building this so we could make sure that it worked the best for them. The weekly task had to be completed and the experience fed back by an online survey. And essentially what we had agreed at the get-go is that we would launch the system with essentially what was a bare minimum starting point. And we made sure that the users were aware of this when we were rolling out. Following each week's feedback, we would work with the development team at Binder to kind of tweak any of the issues, identify and see if we can improve things as the process went along. And then following that kind of 2 to 3 month process, we proceeded with our phased rollout. So as I mentioned, we had about 155 local HKs at the time, and we did a staggered approach over the next 3 months, adding 50 partners or so to the system just to get a feel for it, to make sure it can manage the scale and the use. And to help us actually manage the feedback that we would get for those that we were kind of onboarding onto the system. So since that time, it's been a really interesting process with the system, and we've had some really great feedback. But one of the key things, the carrots, if you like, that we used when we were implementing this system was that as part of getting onto this system, the benefit for those local HKs is that they would have first access to our new winter campaign resources. So this was around about the October time. The campaign was to launch at the end of November 2016, and the real kind of focus behind getting the network on there. We knew that there were winning partners, but we were also aware that they had a lot going on locally. So ideally, we really needed a strong prompt to get them to sign up and to commit to being involved and testing and trialing everything and giving us that feedback. And it worked really well, actually. We committed to making sure that all our new campaign resources would be live on the system. So those that got in first would be the ones to have the first access. And it was actually a really, really good way to encourage them to get onto the system. The other great thing about that, it wasn't just templates we supplied. We also, for the first time, had a video that we encouraged them to use. The great thing about the system as well is that you could also house like PDFs and Word documents. So we had a lot of guidance and a campaign pack that we had housed in the system as well. And so we had everything in a really nice, easy to use central place. And I think it really had a positive impact in getting people to sign up to the system and kind of get themselves familiar with it. So since then, roll on a few years, we'll roll on a year or so, we have now extended the number of users on our system. When we first rolled out, we allowed just a single user per local age UK, just so we could manage expectations, manage support, also encourage them to be really focused about who would be owning the access to this system within their own organisations. Since that time, we've extended it to 2 users per local age UK. We continue to grow our asset library, which has been really, really key. And one of the lovely things that we're able to do is, like I mentioned before, we have our own image library that we make accessible to the network, but they're also able to share theirs as well. So they have the option to share their images of, if they have an event, a tea dance, an open day, a class, a session, they can share their images with us. And if they so feel, they can also extend these images to the rest of the network. So it means that we are really growing the diversity, the breadth and the scale of our image library that we have. The other lovely thing, and one of the key things that we talked about when developing this system, was enabling something that could grow with us. So we are now in the early stages of looking at an additional element that's going to help us grow our story collection, our case studies, and this is very, very early days, but it's just great that there is capacity within Binder to help us realise this new element that we're looking at developing. So following our launch in 2016, one of the lovely things that we're looking at moving forward is growing the breadth of the templates that we have on the system. So when we originally launched, I think we went out with about 12 templates. They've been mostly well received. I think it's still a work in progress. We're still trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work, what the need of the network is. So we'll be implementing a program from January 2018 to really start looking closely at the breadth of templates that we supply, the need on the ground. Is it just one that needs this particular template? Is it the whole network that's going to benefit? And then start prioritizing how we build and develop those new assets. Moving on, I think, as always with projects of this nature, there's always some challenges faced. I think one of the things that we've had to work hard to do, coming from our older system that had something like 250 template options on there, we've been working really hard to actually rationalize the number of templates that we have. As I say, we launched with 12. Ideally, I don't think we would want to exceed any more than 50. It really depends on the need, but I think it's quite important to have a clean and easy to implement approach to the way that you develop these templates as well. And I think one of the key things that we'll be doing, like I say, in the new year is looking at what is the need, what are the new template requests from the network, is there a way that we can better utilize what we have, is there actually a need to have loads of newfangled templates on there. But I think, like I say, working with the network, we're going to work hard to work up what that's going to look like over what period of time, and just develop the resources that we can supply to them. One of the key things, like I mentioned, was establishing a format. So the builds of these templates can be quicker and easier. With each new template format that we develop, it is potential that there could be new glitches and new issues that arrive. So it's just, how do we monitor that? How do we feed back, and how do we quickly turn that around? And then one of the things for 2018 is one of the functions that have been recently introduced is the DIY function. This is something I'm quite excited about because I think it's going to make it far easier and quicker for us to actually develop templates for the network, and kind of get them out far quicker. So I mentioned One of the carrots that we used for getting people on board the system last year was the 2016 winter campaign. How we used it rolling out the campaign via the system, as I mentioned, was making sure that all of the resources that we had were available on this system. We made sure that we supplied guidance, direction, a contact email, a support team to help those in the network that were accessing the system for the first time, to help them understand how they could and also how they couldn't use the resources. There was a degree of restrictions. So obviously with a winter campaign, one of the things that we had, because it wasn't our standard imagery, there is licensing against that. So it's just making sure that they knew that beyond a certain date, some of these assets couldn't be used anymore. The templates that were available were just campaign specific. So the great thing about the system is obviously you can kind of switch these things on and off. So it meant that at the end of that time, we were able to shut those down so people could no longer access those. One of the other challenges that we had at the time was the creation of these templates. So initially when we launched, I think they did take maybe 2 to 3 weeks, but I think, as I say, the DIY is something that's really revolutionized how fast it will be to actually create these templates and get them out to the masses.
Brilliant. So I think, so this is Mike from Binder. We thought what would be very useful is to look at some sort of golden tips for collaboration and to how to approach, I suppose, trying to implement a solution such as Binder. We're conscious that hopefully some of the people who have tuned in today might sort of be in the very early stages of looking into solutions. So yeah, I think sort of over the next sort of few minutes, these could be some pretty valuable tips. So the first tip is to get everyone on board. It's something that Hazel's really stressed today is how adoption is vital in systems like these. I hear time and time again sort of legacy systems where they haven't really been used, and it's taken a lot of resources, a lot of time, and a lot of money to get systems up and running. So obviously it's critical for these systems to be used. And I think a really important and key part of adoption of a system is that everyone is on board from the start. Communicating with not just sort of maybe the 2 or 3 people involved in the project, but anyone who's going to have any interaction with this tool, communicate to them what it is that you're doing, why you're looking into these systems, and more importantly, how it's going to personally benefit that person. It's very often in sort of early stage conversations with companies that sort of the requirements are sort of, there's a few requirements that are really key to a project, but by the sort of 5th or 6th week of having these talks, the list has grown enormously, and that's really valuable when trying to look into a solution to make sure that everyone's concerns are addressed. It also creates a bit more excitement about the product. People can relate the project to their everyday processes, and the success of a system really is down to the excitement behind it, and it's something which we encourage with all clients sort of working within Binder or looking to that implementation phase is to make everyone aware of the purpose of the project, get them excited, and that kind of ensures a very smooth sort of launch and adoption. I think it's also really important to understand, not just within, say, the brand team or the marketing team, but to get all other departments and all other people interested in the project. As I mentioned earlier, sort of requirements grow and grow throughout this process, and quite often we'll find that when it comes to actually implementing a system, the initial scope of the solution has grown to pretty much every department. Every department has the need to access content. Every department has the need to, in some respect, create content, and obviously you want to ensure that the marketing, the branding behind that is safe and that it's consistent. So the next golden tip would be to let everyone contribute. And I think Hazel, again, you really Brand Hub is a perfect example of this, where allowing people to share content from all over the world or all over the UK. It really empowers the branding to use content that's actually generated from people who are involved in the projects, people who are involved in the campaigns. But the method, obviously, for letting everyone to contribute has to be sort of controlled in a certain way. You need to ensure, again, that the content that's created is consistently on brand. you need to provide people with that level of flexibility so that they can, they can contribute and that they can see that this content is going somewhere. But obviously, you need a solution in place to make sure that, first of all, these contributions are managed in the correct way. And also that, this growing library of content that's accumulating, that people have access to it, and the people are aware of how to use it, which again, I suppose, comes back to adoption. And the final thing I just wanted to touch on was templates. So templates are essential nowadays. One of the biggest use cases for Binder that we come across are teams who have either creative agencies or designers who are spending so much of their time replicating content with sort of small little changes, small little additions. And again, sort of relating back to something we touched on earlier, having one sort of person policing a brand, it can create a bottleneck, and sort of the implications of then requesting content through to actually content being created and ready to go live. These time delays can be critical to the success of a campaign. So having a tool where you can ensure that people have the flexibility of being creative, but that the final outcome is 100% on brand, is consistent with the other messages and all the other content that's being created. It's a really valuable tool. So I think it's something to look for. I say in the future. We at Binder have got it at the moment, but it's a very valuable tool, and it's something which there's a lot of focus on at the moment, in terms of enabling clients to create templates very easily, to have them as intuitive as the actual solution itself, and to create a process whereby this content can be created really quickly, really easily, can get out to market, can do its job, serve its purpose, but that it's 100% on brand. Okay, so I think I'm gonna hand back to Hazel to sort of talk about the next chapter for Age UK.
Great. So the next chapter. So we have done a great deal, I would say, in the past year and a half with getting ourselves set up with our Brand Hub system. One of the exciting new developments that we now have underway following our launch is looking at how we can centrally collect, collate, and share stories about older people that we use a lot across all of our marketing and fundraising resources. We have a growing interest from across the organisation about how we can better serve the various communities, and one of the ways, I think I mentioned earlier, one of the ways we really connect with people is by using the real stories of individuals that we've helped, and also those that are living their best life essentially as older people. There are a great many examples of really difficult later life stories, but there are also a great many of really inspirational. So what we are keen to do is look at how this digital asset management system can help us centralize this resource, how we can protect that sensitive data, how we can build what it is that we collect from these people across the country, across the world, even if they were interested in sharing, and looking at how we can better manage and communicate these stories, and just make sure that we are protecting, most importantly, the sensitive data, but also how we can make sure that we are using it in the best ways, in the most appropriate, on the most appropriate channels, and just making sure that we are helping people to help us by sharing their stories about later life.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank
that's
you.
really
Thank
inspiring. I think the thing that you mentioned at the end, just there about building all the, the real stories and building a brand community is obviously really, really important for companies, no matter what sector you're in. So got a couple of questions, if that's okay, guys.
Yeah.
So one for you, Hazel. Obviously, you went to tender what you needed out of them for building your festive campaigns. And what were Binder's winning benefits? How did Binder win?
So, as I mentioned, our key thing when looking for this system, our main stakeholder was the local Age UK network, and the way in which that we support them is essentially the templates. So we saw quite a few suppliers with some similar, some not so similar facilities and systems, but the thing about the Binder solution was essentially the ease of creating and storing, the flexibility and the capabilities that the templates offered. And I think that was the thing that really won it for us. As a charity, our brand is so important, so valuable to just everything that we do. And we need to make sure that nationally, from my perspective as a brand marketing manager, that we're doing the most that we can to protect it, to make sure that it's implemented in the right way. But we are a small team and we can't be out there policing. We don't want to be. I think we've got a really strong brand. We do some really fantastic work, and we needed a solution that was going to help us help the network. They do the work on the ground. They engage daily with older people. They are making such a difference, and we need to make sure that we can supply them with the resources that they need to do that. And I think the templates were the main focus for us when we were putting out the tender, and the binder solution definitely, I think, for me anyway, kind of came top of that list.
Yeah, brilliant. And obviously you've got the DIY function now, which is even better. So great news. So when you first went to build the brand hub, like how long would you say that process took, and where did you even begin when thinking about, right, okay, how do we collect all our assets?
So we
approach it?
Such a lot of work. I have to say it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was. I think what we were very clear that we weren't going to do was just transfer from old system to new. So we essentially had a blank slate. We had a rough idea, template-wise anyway, of the work that the network was doing, the kind of communications that they were putting out on a regular basis. So knowing the foundation of having to have a formula for your templates and what you were going to produce, we had quite a clear idea on what messaging we were going to feature, how they might be laid out, what images we might use. And so I think it was really helpful coming from that blank slate to be able to just apply it straight away. So we didn't kind of take something old and say, well, how could we change it and make it better? We just started from scratch. And I think because we were aware of the formulaic approach of building the templates, actually it made it really easy. Because we were aware we weren't trying to change something and shoehorn it into the binder way of doing it. It was very much, we'll start from scratch. And actually what was great is because we came up with really nice, new, fresh looking materials as well. So it was really helpful to start from scratch, design them based on knowing what the formula was, and that kind of fed into everything we did. So it made it quite easy.
Yeah, a refreshing new chapter.
Most definitely.
Brand, And Mike, do you have any pieces of advice that you would give to people who are looking to take on a DAM platform? Maybe how would they convince their internal stakeholders that they need something like this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think digital asset management is an interesting topic in some organisations because a lot of people don't really know what it means or what it does. A lot of, something I hear quite often is, we use sort of Google Drive or we use Dropbox, and these essentially are storage methods. Whereas a modern DAM system has, so many benefits, and I think it's really important to make sure people are aware of those. A modern DAM system should automate so many of the mundane, repetitive sort of tasks or processes which marketing teams get bogged down with every day. And I think if you can convince people in the value and how it's going to better their workday, how it's going to lighten their load, and essentially free them up to work on sort of higher value tasks, but also to sort of, marketing people, branding people, they're creative. They're brought on to come up with creative concepts to enhance a brand. And I think nowadays there are so many solutions and so many tools being used that it kind of detracts away from that. And in some respects, people lose that creative flair. And I think a solution like this can enable them to have the more time to get back to the core purpose, which is to come up with brilliant content to get the brand out there. So I think get as many people on board as possible, understand what processes people go through, and try and tie those in. Do some research on features, basic things like creating derivatives of files for different use, whether it's web, print, or here. For a lot of companies that's still a manual process, and it's something which can be automated by a modern system. I think good people to try and get in contact with are can be the brand guardians who tend to get inundated with requests for content, which is there and it's readily available. People just don't know how to find it. People, things that are stored in a folder structure, in a hierarchy, is quite an archaic way of working. And a modern solution is so intuitive that you can, within a few seconds, search through a vast library of content and find what it is you're looking for. Yeah. There's no reason to trouble other people with these requests. So I think find people who look stressed and find out why they're stressed. And I would normally say that, a solution like Binder would be able to automate a lot of those processes and make, people should be on board after that, I would have thought.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thanks so much, guys. That was really, really interesting and great to hear more about Age UK and how Binder can just help companies. That's brilliant. Thank you to our audience as well. Merry Christmas, I suppose. And I hope you'll join us for some more webinars in 2018. You can listen back for more tips and tricks at our webinar library at www.thedrum.com/webinars. Thank you very much. Bye.